In one corner, we have the deadliest fighting force in human history, a military power that, despite rising competitors, remains without equal. With a navy more powerful than the rest of the world's combined, and an air force without peer, the United States sits firmly at the top of the military mountain. In the other corner, we have one of the most iconic superhero teams of all time. Stalwart protectors of humanity and mutant kind alike, the X-Men, who use incredible powers to fight off all kinds of threats, from the intergalactic to the demonic. So who would win if these two juggernauts clashed against each other? For most of its early history, the United States was at best a second-rate military power, and it wasn't until the years between World War I and World War II that the U.S. Navy's size began to compare to the supreme naval power in the world, Great Britain. However, despite having the numbers, the United States lacked the professional and technological expertise to be a true global power. When it joined the Allies in World War II, the United States was still considered a formidable but ultimately second-tier power, and the early performance of its military didn't help change this opinion any. The Sherman tank that the US brought to the fight in North Africa was considered by many to be one of the worst tanks of the war, and after the war, German tank commanders went on record saying that at times they pitied the Americans and could not fathom that a government would send its troops to war with such inferior weaponry. The US fared little better at the outset of the war in the Pacific. The Japanese Zero outperformed American planes, and its pilots were far better trained. Yet the US learned quickly from its mistakes, and soon it was turning the tide of battle on both fronts. What US troops had initially lacked in proficiency, they made up in sheer determination, and American soldiers would go on to be some of the most decorated by foreign nations of any members of the alliance. After the Second World War, the US quickly developed the now famous military offsets, which enabled it to dominate any foe in combat. The first offset was its nuclear superiority, which allowed it to offset the Soviet Union's superior conventional numbers. The second offset in the 1970s was the development of precision-guided munitions, giving US firepower incredible precision and lethality, leaving no foe anywhere in the world safe from attack. Today, the US retains its global leadership in military power, and while Russia still presents a formidable threat, it's the rise of China that most threatens America's military supremacy. In response, the Pentagon has announced a third offset strategy, which will leverage a combination of high-technology assets with legacy weapon systems. While future plans remain classified, what is known is that the US plans to pursue artificial intelligence, directed energy weapons, robotics, and electromagnetic railguns as part of its third offset. The X-Men are a team of mutants brought together by the venerable Professor X. As a powerful telepath, Professor X, or Charles Xavier, founded a private academy in order to help mutants develop and control their superpowers. Living in a world where mutants are feared and sometimes even discriminated against, Professor X refuses to adopt the more violent approach to mutant liberation that his former friend Magneto espouses, instead adhering to a strict doctrine of pacifism. That doesn't mean that Professor X isn't more than willing to send out his famous X-Men to go out and kick some butt when needed though, and the motley crew of superheroes is a formidable force indeed. Backed up with Professor X's vast fortune, the team brings cutting-edge technology and superior training to any fight. With dozens of mutants having been a part of the X-Men at some time or another, we'll be focusing on what are widely considered the classic X-Men members for this battle royale: Wolverine, Professor X, Cyclops, Iceman, Storm, Jubilee, and Jean Grey. So who would win in this climactic winner-take-all battle? Let's find out. First up is Wolverine, with an incredible healing factor, retractable claws, and an adamantium skeleton that is almost completely unbreakable. He is going to be a formidable foe indeed. His healing factor alone is going to make an infantry assault largely pointless, as the US Army's M4 rifle and its 5.56 round simply isn't going to do much except piss him off. Even the M240 Bravo machine gun and its 7.62 round is largely going to be useless against the Canadian superhero. We need to up the firepower dramatically. Known as Silver Bullets, American M1 Abrams tanks fire depleted uranium-discarding sabot rounds that have incredible penetrating power against any armor in the world, and getting hit by one of these in the chest is going to give Wolverine some serious pause. But Wolverine is a lot smaller than a battle tank, and a lot more agile, so actually hitting him is going to be difficult to say the least. Plus, his claws will shred through even composite tank armor pretty easily. Instead, we're going to be calling for fire support from the US Air Force, and for its inventory of thermobaric bombs. Thermobaric weapons were developed to destroy troops inside fortifications such as foxholes, tunnels, and caves. They work by consuming all of the oxygen in the environment, making them far more energetic than conventional explosives, and with the added bonus of suffocating any person not immediately burned to a crisp. Wolverine may be able to heal very quickly, but without air to breathe, he's gonna have a difficult time staying conscious. And once unconscious, mopping up the foul-mouthed Canuck isn't gonna be particularly difficult. His skeleton may be unbreakable, but all the soft, fleshy bits definitely aren't. A study of thermobaric bombs and their lethality by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency states that the kill mechanism against living targets is unique and unpleasant. What kills is the pressure wave, and more importantly, the subsequent vacuum which ruptures the lungs. If the fuel deflagrates but does not detonate, victims will be severely burned and will probably also inhale the burning fuel. With lungs full of fuel burning at several thousand degrees, after a second and third thermobaric bomb, all that'll be left of Wolverine is a shiny skeleton with no living tissue to regenerate. We're giving this one to the US military. Next up is Jubilee, a superhero that in the early 2000s received some serious upgrades. While it's well known that she's able to manipulate low levels of energy to create firework-like effects, in the early 2000s she gained the potential to actually detonate matter at the atomic level, in effect giving her the power to create nuclear explosions. However, we aren't buying that crap, and we're sticking with Jubilee's original powers, because you don't get to upgrade your powers just because for decades you were a useless firework shooter. In this matchup, Jubilee is simply going to get shot in the face, and there's literally nothing she can do but shoot dazzling lights at her attackers. Match over, win to the US military. Next up is Cyclops, whose ability to project optic blasts makes him a daunting opponent for anyone. While often mistaken for a laser, Cyclops' optic blast is actually a concussive force that comes from an interdimensional aperture located just behind Cyclops' eyes. Known as the Red Dimension, when Cyclops opens this aperture, the energy of an alien dimension is blasted out into our world with devastating effects. Yet, for all the power generated by his ability to tap into interdimensional space, Cyclops is still very much a human, albeit a very physically fit one. He may be able to destroy tanks with his eyes, but a single round from a 50 caliber Barrett M95 sniper rifle will be more than enough to eliminate Cyclops from the battle. Featuring some of the best trained marksmen in the world, the US military's elite snipers are experts in camouflage and long-range precision, and none of Cyclops' powers will let him detect the presence of a hidden sniper team a mile or more away. Win, US military. Iceman is probably the most obvious to explain of the X-Men's roster. He can chill the ambient temperature to incredibly low levels, generating everything from walls of ice to a frozen path of ice that he can ride in combat. The thing about Iceman, though, is that he needs water to be present in the environment in order for his power to freeze it. And one thing about thermobaric bombs is they consume oxygen to generate an explosive blast hot enough to boil away any water in the environment. Iceman is going to very quickly be Ashman after a single blast from a fuel-air explosive, so we're immediately calling this one in favor of the US military again. Storm is probably one of the most iconic, definitely one of the most powerful mutants in history. With the power to manipulate the weather at will, Storm can do everything from control tornadoes to summon torrential rains. Storm's ability to generate any kind of weather that she likes is far more powerful a weapon against a modern military than you might think, and we have to admit that this is definitely going to be a one-sided fight. An infantry assault against Storm will be disastrous, as she'll simply summon bolts of lightning to fry every single soldier. Long-range snipers? No dice, as thick fog will shield her from view, and by raising the ambient temperature outside her fog barrier, she'll become invisible to infrared. Okay, what about long-range fire support? Hurricane-like winds will make artillery useless and impossible for any airplane to get close enough to deliver bombs on target. Even a cruise missile will be easily blown off course by Storm's winds. Short of nuclear weapons, we're calling this one a win for Storm. Professor X and Jean Grey are up next, and as they share such similar powers, we feel the fight against these two will pretty much go the same way. Note that we're talking about Jean Grey here, not Phoenix, so we're focusing solely on the mental manipulation powers of both characters. With the ability to create telekinetic force shields, any kinetic weapon that the US military has is going to be largely useless, and any manned attack against the telepathic duo is doomed to failure from the offset, as their abilities allow them to sense minds at incredible distances. A long-range precision weapon strike such as a Tomahawk missile might be a good idea. After all, there's no brain to manipulate inside the missile, except for, again, their telekinetic shields. Short of a nuclear weapon, once more the US military simply doesn't have the goods to defeat these two telepaths. And even if it did, Professor X has one more power up his sleeve that makes him practically unbeatable: the ability to instantly transfer his consciousness into any mind. This essentially makes Professor X immortal, and with his ability to sense minds almost anywhere on Earth, the Prof can mind jump into a new body faster than you can kill his old one. So good luck killing a person who can simply become you with a thought. In the end, with the combined powers of the entire team, we're going to declare the X-Men the winners, although there's definitely only 3 of them that are going to do the heavy lifting here: Storm, Jean Grey, and Professor X. Wolverine, Iceman, and Cyclops may be cool and well-loved characters, but in the real world, these superheroes would be super dead when put up against modern military technology. And Jubilee is of course the single most useless superhero ever created. And no, we're not going to accept that she can suddenly explode matter at the atomic level just because she sucked for decades before that. You don't get upgrades just because you're useless. Disagree with our verdict? Do you still love Jubilee despite her worthlessness? What other epic matchup would you like to see in our Who Would Win series? Let us know in the comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.